Dimp Digital presents Idle Game Chat.
Cool. Hello, apps here from Dimp Digital. Welcome to Idle Game Chat. This is Dimp Digital's flagship video game podcast where we take you through the ups and the downs from the gaming world. We are here on your favourite podcast app and YouTube, absolutely free. However, if you want to support our grassroots independent endeavour, head over to patreon.com/Dimp Digital and join the community. Hashtag hand in pocket. On this edition, I'm joined by the one-time Fantasy Gaming League, it still is that, Grand Prix winner. It's the resident referee. It's Logan. How's it going?
Yep, good. First one of the year, this. Feels weirdly rusty. Feels like it's such a regular appearer, if you like, almost regular co-host, some might say, for a significant period of time, that a couple of weeks off feels like forever.
Yeah, I did feel that. I always do it when I come back. I always think, well, am I rusty or is this the poorness just showing through, the inconsistency? It's why you're not on radio doing this as a living, because you got to be on point, haven't you? And again, they do that daily. Like, you must just get into a flow of that. And I
think whatever you do, like, you just go into autopilot for some elements of it. But especially when you're not doing something like this, like daily as a day job, and you're not focusing 100% of everything onto it, it definitely is easier to become rusty, I think.
Yeah. And also this morning, just to expose the business, this is an AM recording. You know, we don't...
First one ever, maybe.
Well, for you, I've recorded segments with, like, Bud, who's in Australia, at 7 or 8 in the morning our time. But I don't think generally we've ever done a GMT sort of pre 11 o'clock before, and this is, just ticked past 8 a.m, so this is early. Coffees have been brewed. I don't know if you've got one there or just downed yours, but he's got his there.
There it is.
So that's what we're working with. There may be an extra element of rustiness or just lackadaisical behaviour, because it is, the AM here. Bin day as well, as we were discussing offline.
That stung me. Meant to get on air 8 o'clock sharp, and then went, better not, because if those bin men come outside, they're unpredictable.
They don't come till fucking 2 p.m. usually, but then on the day you don't put it out, you bet your bollocks they're there at 8:30.
Well, I need that. They always come round. I need that garden bin emptied.
Yeah.
And they've come round before. They usually come round like ridiculously early with that, and then they leave all the rest of the till the PM. But as you say, chances are that the day when I'm tied up, they'll come round. You start hearing that chundering down the road, and you start panicking. So,
it is, you do get like a warning, don't you? Because you can hear it just going, and you think, oh shit, have I done that? But we've got our ducks in a row there. Anyway, we know what the undisputed best way to start a podcast is, and it is delay news. And it hasn't taken long in 2023 for us to have to bring this subject to the table. Unsurprisingly, or maybe it's surprising because it's just so ridiculous, Skull and Bones. Penciled in for March the 9th, but Ubisoft have confirmed it has been delayed until early in Ubisoft's next fiscal year, which runs from April until March 2024. So it could just be April. Unlikely, but, it could be in the next 6 months. According to Insider Gaming, this is now the 6th delay that this game has received since it was announced in 2017. I mean, do you think they're fucking about with us with this, Ubisoft? And they're like, let's just really get up on me and pretend that this thing still exists and is coming out, and actually it's all a big joke to them.
Well, we saw it, didn't we? Was it last year you and I watched a video?
Funnily enough, you're talking about when you started having more sort of regular appearances. That was the first episode when we watched a showcase of it, about 40 minutes long, and now we're back round here, full cycle again. Consider law.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, I think that video put both you and I off it in a lot of ways.
It did.
I mean, you just feel like they're trolling you a little bit at this point, and I feel a bit sorry for Skull and Bones as a game, because you think, like, who's it going to be appealing to at this point? Like, what? at some point they're just going to have to chuck it out and just let it flop, I think, and then just be done with it. I don't know how long they can keep kicking the can down the road with it.
No.
I mean, I do want it to be good. The concept of it is something that both, I think, you and I bang behind, like the idea of doing that. But the execution is a concern, and they've obviously got the same concerns within Ubisoft. Otherwise, they wouldn't keep kicking the bloody can down the road, would they?
No. We want more pirate games, and this is kind of that. Although you are just trying to ship mostly, so you sort of taking the role of a boat, I guess. The little fella can walk around it on land, but I don't think you do much of it. And yeah, I mean, this is just. I mean, there's actually probably a more poignant story about Ubisoft in general. Their financial results were not very good. They've had to reevaluate their forecasts and whatnot, and we won't get into all that because it's well above our pay grade. But it's not looking good. They cancelled 3 games, apparently. 3 unannounced games that they were working on that they've also canned. So, not good. But I guess we'll see how Skull and Bones plays out in the weeks and probably the months to come. FGL update. We're in a new season, so these may come thick and fast. I'm sure we'll get our lulls like we did last year during the summer period. But Paper in the Grand Prix, which is the 6-person event, is first to strike. One Piece Odyssey. He's 5th pick overall, so it's above things like Minecraft Legends and Pikmin. And I was like, well, where's he? When we talk about and criticise, and we know it's difficult, but sometimes when you see the ordering of things, you think, I've not even heard of this.
Yeah, why are the obvious ones not getting...
Yeah.
Sometimes I feel like there's this desire, I think, to find the hidden gem. Like we often discuss in the group, don't we, about people, how have they not picked that up and whatnot. And I think sometimes nowadays people are going for those, trying to find those hidden gems, whereas sometimes the best thing to do when you look at the average that's required to win it is to just get those sort of 80s and above out the blocks.
Yeah, because someone else could have nipped one of those other 2, which you'd think would perhaps score better. But we'll see. It'll all pan out in the data. That's the beauty of this.
Everyone wants a Pentiment. That's what they're looking for.
You set the standard of you. Is that what you're saying?
What's that?
You say you set the standard now of finding a hidden gem of you. You're like, Pentiment's now the gold standard of hidden gems, and I'm the man.
Everyone's going to find this artsy toot. That's basically what. I mean, yeah. I think that's the standard of what you're looking for from the hidden gems, but they are few and far between. And for every Pentiment, you get a scorn. So
that's
the way
true.
it goes.
That is the way it goes. One Piece Odyssey, as I said, he's 5th pick, scored a 76 so far. Now these scores are fluid. That'll probably go up or down a couple by now, but not a fantastic start, but not a terminal disaster. I mean, it's above the 75 at the moment. It will probably remain, it won't go lower than 73, you think, which isn't ideal. But when you get into the 60s and the high 60s, that's what you want to avoid. Because you had 2 60s. Well, that would mean they were high 60s. There was 69 and I think 68, and still won. So by no means a disgraceful score.
It puts the pressure on. That's what it does. Like, really, you want that sort of toot for later down the line. You don't really want it coming out first out of the blocks. I think that's the problem with it. Not necessarily the score overall, but the first one you get clocked up, you don't want to be in the 70s, ideally.
No, you want a good 90, because then there's a 15-ish gap already opened up, and you're like, well, I'm already 15 points behind someone. So, yeah, you're right. You do want to get out the gates quick, but 76, I think in the grand scheme of things, won't be a total disaster. I've named this section the odds and sods. These are basically just headliners and quotes taken from VGC. These have happened since the start of the year, because we did our sort of Gaming's Most Wanted on the last edition. Didn't do any news topics as such. I do want to try and get away from it, but I don't think we'd quite... The news just makes sure you've got something to talk about every week. So you kind of have to rely on it. But we'll see how it goes throughout the year. Maybe we'll tweak things. But these are just quick bits and pieces. Obviously, I'll say don't shout if you've got a comment, but I'll often just then suddenly pause and expect you to have input. So just be alert to my scatty ways. Gran Turismo and Beat Saber are coming to PlayStation VR 2. This was on Sony CES presentation they did. Jim Ryan was up there talking, so we got to see the man come out of his cave and have a little chat. He also said that the PlayStation 5 has cleared 30 million sales after its biggest month yet. So I'm guessing he's referring to December there. and claimed that the console is now more widely available. And I would tend to agree with that anecdotally. I follow a few like PlayStation 5 stock tracker sites, and even those guys it was probably November time, mid-November, they put a tweet out saying, we're not going to notify you every time the PS5's in stock now because it's becoming so regular. Instead, we're going to focus on bundles and good deals. So already seeing sort of, the guys that are trying to help people grab them shift away from just stock suggests to me that they are more easy to get hold of. I've still not seen one in a shop, mind you. I've not walked around and seen one sitting in any level of shop. Then again, do I go out to these shops? No. So a pointless comment. Sony also revealed a PS5 accessibility controller called Project Leonardo, and that's obviously aimed to help players with disabilities. Good to see them going down this road because Microsoft have kind of been leading in that of their accessibility controller, and Sony are going for that. It looks, I don't know how these things are researched or put into R&D, but it looks really interesting the way they're designed. I don't know if you saw a picture of it. It's like this round like disc type thing, and I'm super interested if they ever do a backstory on how they sort of research and come up with that and say this is what we feel like would be useful to people across kind of like all the different areas. But that was Sony at CES. Xbox got some news incoming, which will definitely help for podcast chat. Xbox and Bethesda announced a developer direct confirmed for January the 25th. And you broke this news in the Dimp WhatsApp group. The newsbreaker, they're calling him. He's down the ground getting the scoops.
Was that me?
I think it was you.
I don't know. I'm just going back now and I'm thinking, does it sound like... the problem is... Oh, no. The one that I did was the carbon aware piece.
Oh, we got that. Don't worry.
We've got that there. It was Adkins, actually.
That makes more sense. I don't think anyone responded to him. Bless him.
No, they didn't. It was radio silence on that. That shows you how everyone thought about that.
Yeah, and then Hall posts a picture of a fucking shark that's got a PC built in it, and people are popping off about it. And it's like, well, why are we getting comments on that? Anyway, January the 25th for that. Like to hear about Redfall and others. They did say you're not likely to hear about Starfield, which I think's fine. I'm hoping at the event, either one, they're lying, which they do lie, so it might appear, but more realistically, they'll just say, look, we've got a singular event for that coming, and here's the date of that. That would be cool. Or just to give a time frame on that. But yeah, Forza, Redfall, and more is what they've kind of placed in there.
To coin your phrase, big pressure, I think. It feels like Xbox need to have a good year this year.
They need to have a great year.
They need to chuck out something better than what they have done in recent years. So having that early on with Bethesda, I think, is a pressure cooker. They need to get people hyped up, I think, and deliver. Yeah,
that's the most important thing. Talk is cheap, but it's good to see them getting early, because the big criticism last year was, you weren't at the Game Awards with anything. And then within 30 days of that, or slightly more, they've come out and said, look, we're doing our own thing. There's no point us paying Jeff for that. The show's already 3.5 hours long and you'll forget about it, which I agree with. Like these bloody showcases, you forget about what happens to most of it. At least here they can just focus on their stuff. So absolutely looking forward to that. As you mentioned earlier, Microsoft says a new Xbox update, which I think's gone out to insiders initially, will probably be coming to everyone else, will make it, quote, the first carbon-aware console. Now, this is interesting. They're making a big deal about this, because for me, they've been carbon-aware from last year, especially. They didn't release any games, so I didn't need to switch it on. So that's the ultimate carbon-aware. I ain't even had a footprint. I'm joking, Phil. Friend of the show.
Sticking the boot in after we just spoke about him, saying there's big pressure, and you stick the boot in even harder.
No,
got the knife out, really digging it in.
Gotta get up, Phil, wouldn't you? Because Jim's easy target. He's easy prey. He just screams, insult me with his poor consumer angry practices. But Phil, everyone loves. So if you get up him, you get people's backs up, and that's what we want to do. The company is rolling out a number of energy saving features. Xbox insiders will have their console automatically set to shutdown mode when updates will happen at carbon friendly times. So basically, it's some sort of timer that if you leave it in this mode, or just by default, I guess they're going to switch this on, it will do the updates at times where the energy's not being used. I mean, I don't understand all this. I mean, if the energy's getting used, it's getting used. I'm sure someone with much more intelligence about this will tell me why that's a good thing, but it seems like it's going to be a choice anyway, so if you're not happy with it... The only choice I want is the option, when I go and turn it off on the controller, to turn it off completely so nothing happens, or put it in some sort of energy mode, and you can't do that without going into the bloody settings.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
The PS5 does it, so... Why aren't you doing that? That'd be the ultimate carbon friendly. But I saw you shaking your head at this quote. First carbon aware console. And we know you're down those rabbit holes and whatnot, and don't like this sort of nonsense coming out. So no doubt this got your back up a little bit.
I wouldn't say it's
the terminology, isn't it?
It's the terminology that bothers me.
First
Yeah.
carbon aware console.
Like, it's not the print. Like, the idea. To your point. Like, the idea of they've already got a power saving mode, all this kind of stuff. Like, anything that, you know, even from a purely selfish perspective, that doesn't cost me money or drains electricity whilst I'm not using it, like, I'm fine with that. And even the principle that it is carbon aware and why it's better to do it at certain times. It's like when they say, oh, you should put your washing machine on overnight because there's less drain.
Wakes the dog up.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't do it. It's just not feasible. It's too loud. But the principle is that there's less demand on the network, and therefore they don't have to burn coal and whatnot.
They can use renewable energies at that time.
That
bloody wind only gives you about 5% of the energy required. So
at the moment, I suspect it's giving it nearly 95% by the sounds of it outside, making a right racket. But yeah, I get the principle and I like it, and even just like the option to do updates overnight, which I'm pretty sure it does already.
Yeah,
I think the thing that I'm confused about is what it's doing over and above, and this idea that it's got a brain in it that chooses when is the best time somehow.
It's carbon aware. It knows what it's doing.
It's like saying something self-aware, or like a car that's driving, like it's doing something for you. It's making decisions actively or something, and it's just not. All you're doing is saying it's a schedule. Yeah, it's a schedule. That's all it is. It's like me saying that my Outlook is self-aware when all I've done is scheduled an email to go out at a certain time. Like,
it's got an out of office on it, self-aware.
Yeah, it's just a bizarre way to phrase it. But yeah, it's not that I'm in principle against what they're doing. I think, fine, anything that makes it more, less power hungry or makes it more efficient in some way, great. Like, I'm all behind it. But don't call it carbon aware. Like, all you're doing is ticking those ESG boxes off. That's all it becomes.
Well, I wonder where that would go, because we know you're good friends with Graham Hancock, and Ancient Apocalypse has been dominating your Netflix cycle. I don't think I put you onto that, but I've watched it, and
it prompted me to. It reminded me. So I've seen it out there, and I was like, oh yeah, that's something I should watch. And then just coincidentally, I was back in London full time this week, so I was like, it's a great time just to watch them on the train. Oh,
they're only half hour long.
Yeah, it's ideal. I love that.
Yeah. It's handy.
Half hour, the titles.
Poor old Graham. This one sort of fell because it landed in that period where no one's covering anything. But EA says that 60% of the recently wiped Madden saves are likely unrecoverable. And this is related to their franchise mode, which my understanding of that is you can spend hundreds of hours in there meddling around, creating your own leagues and whatnot. Electronic Arts doesn't expect to be able to recover the majority of NFL 23's franchise save files that were corrupted due to a data storage issue. In a forum post, the publisher apologised for the issue, which impacted players who logged on into franchise leagues between 7:45 p.m. our time and December 28th and 5:45 a.m. GMT, the one true time zone, on December the 29th. So people that logged on during that stretch, if your save was corrupted, unfortunately, if you've logged on into the franchise leagues during this time, your data was affected due to a data storage issue that resulted in franchise files being corrupted, the publisher has said, and they are not likely to be recovered. What are we doing in 2023 where that's happening? I mean, everyone says all this cloud saving malarkey. This is clearly where it goes wrong. When you're having to ping things up to the cloud and come back and whatnot, and something's cocked up, and there's some poor bastards out there, probably a minute amount of people, but imagine that as Destiny. Like, think of all the character work you've put into something like Destiny, 100 hours or whatever, and you lost your character. It'd be unforgivable, wouldn't it? You would be like, right, well, that's it for me in this publisher or this developer. I'm done.
Or they'd have to just give everything away.
Well,
Like if you've got the game, if you bought it, if you installed it before a certain date, they'd have to say I don't know. They'd have to do something. Otherwise, to your point, you just have to chuck it in the bin. Like you couldn't put days and days of work back in from scratch or whatever to do it. Like it just wouldn't be possible. But it's always been a concern of mine, these cloud saves, and it seems unnecessary in some ways with the amount of storage we've got these days.
Because a lot of the
games in the cloud.
Sorry to cut in, but a lot of the games are. You're forced to have online connectivity to have these modes active. So there's no way you can opt out of it. It's not like the player can say, I'll have it offline. It's like, no, you need to have an online connectivity to play some of these game modes. So you're forced down this funnel, and then they go, well, we've had a bit of a data storage issue, and
about that.
We've lost your data.
It's obvious they've had fucking feet up over that Christmas period as well, which is probably what caused it. Like, they've had no one in the office to sort it out, and there's been an issue. It's compounded and fucked up, and it couldn't... They're like, well, that's happened now. Maybe if we were there, we could have sorted it. But it's New Year now, so bad luck. You'd be pissed off, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
I mean, if you like Madden, you'd be pissed off. But it does just highlight the point of if that happened in any game where there's progress and significant progress that's put in. I mean, can you imagine if your Assassin's Creed cloud save, they went, sorry about that. 130 hours, you're gonna have to start again.
Oh, I wouldn't mind now, but if I hadn't finished it, then but it's the same thing. Like if your Football Manager save went off, after 5 seasons, you'd be like, well, that's just the end, isn't it? It's really,
you just couldn't go back. Like you'd just be like, well, that's that done.
It ain't good enough, EA. But there's nothing that can be done apparently in 2023. That's what we're dealing with. So maybe some warning signs of the future to come as everything goes towards online cloud and saving and connectivity. This is the perils of it. I know people like to wave hands and say, well, there's no downsides to it. It's like, well, here's one here. And yes, obviously an offline save could get corrupted as well, but you don't expect just for playing the game to be punished with a loss of your franchise league. So commiserations to those people. The Hitman games are being combined as World of Assassination. So Hitman 3 will be renamed essentially from January the 26th to be called the World of Assassination, and all 3 games will be available via the same hub. Not major news, just I like to update on Hitman for some reason on this podcast. That's my little thing that I do. It makes sense because going into the game now, like trying to find which version you've got, which version you need to get the Hitman 2 or Hitman 1 levels, plus all the it's just a nightmare. So they're completely gutting it, and people that have got Hitman 3 will get Hitman 2 and 1, for free, is how I've understood it. So it'll be called the World of Assassination, which is basically the trilogy. I don't think there's going to be a new SKU, so I don't think we're going to get a new trophy list, but I will check, because if we've got a new trophy list, then Ronnie can restart again, and he can go through all that turmoil again, so we'll see about that. I quickly, actually, just whilst we're talking about Hitman 3, or what's going to be called Hitman World of Assassination from the 26th onwards, I played the free update called Ambrose Island, which was a new location for the Hitman game, and it's decent. It's free, for one. It doesn't have any story missions or opportunities in there, which are like the hand-holdy sort of go here, get this, execute. But it has all the usual sort of opportunities that you can find naturally and kind of have to think for yourself. So less hand-holdy, but a decent level, and for free, absolutely fine with that. And I slagged off, obviously, the 7 Deadly Sins DLC, which was just a disgrace. They should have just done stuff like this. I'd have paid for this. This is what I wanted, was new locations or new proper missions in the existing locations. So for those of you that got Hitman free, Ambrose Island is free, and it's worth just diving into and having a go at. Anyway, that's the odds and sods, so God knows how long the actual news will take at this rate. European sales data 2022. Chrissy Dring at it again at gamesindustry.biz. Now, I'm a little bit disappointed in what he's given us, and maybe this will come in the weeks that are to come, but I haven't got December's data as a standalone. I've been given, everyone's been given this, it's on their website, the overall 2022 roundup, which must include December, but I haven't seen a separated chart for it. So that little power rankings I do, I can't update. I may bin that anyway. I was just thinking what value's that adding, but we'll see. If Chrissy Dring don't produce December, then it's broken, innit? It can't work, so it'll have to go in the bin. Anyway, this data is according to the latest GSD data, which tracks physical and digital game sales across Europe. It tracks all physical sales in major European countries and digital sales for most AAA publishers, with the main exception being Nintendo, which don't share digital data. And it doesn't include data from indie teams, but I don't think they're usually on the high kind of priced ticket items when it comes to sales. Anyway, here's the top 10 for the entire year. So number 1 in Europe, digital plus physical, and keeping in mind that the Nintendo don't share digital, so you could probably move their ranking up a little bit if their games appear. FIFA 23 was the number 1 game in Europe. Not really a surprise, is it? It's always going to be lurking there or thereabouts, and once again...
It still does.
Yeah.
It still shocks me that people actively every year go out and get this, but at the same time, it's a surprise, but it's not. Every year I go, I can't believe people are still doing that, but evidently they are.
Last FIFA... Well, we would assume the last FIFA branded game that'll appear top of the rankings for a while, because EA will be doing EA Sports FC next year. So that's what you would assume will be top. I don't think there's going to be a FIFA branded game for 2024, but we'll see. Number 2 was Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2. Expected. Number 3, though, Elden Ring, out of the bins and into the mainstream. That's a great result for them. Number 4, Grand Theft Auto 5. Number 5, FIFA 22. So last year's FIFA, the year before last, FIFA gets there. Most of them must pick up sales during the year as well. Number 6, Pokemon Legends Arceus, which is interesting because that's got no digital sales attached to it, so impressive. 7 was God of War Ragnarok, which is again impressive, being an exclusive, only on PS4 and PS5. 8 was Lego Star Wars The Skywalker Saga. 9, Horizon Forbidden West. 10, Gran Turismo 7. So 3 Sony-only games making the top 10, which is pretty impressive. In terms of console sales, PlayStation 5 and Nintendo sales are down year on year in comparison to 2021. Xbox sales are up, so they had a bit of an increase there. The UK is ahead of Germany as Europe's biggest games market. So stick your Brexit up your arse. Number 1 in Europe. That seems mad. I don't know what the population difference is.
Huge, I think.
But
I think there's.
I'll look it up.
It must be at least double in Germany. I mean, Germany's a huge country, but it's much more sparsely populated, I think. 83
mil for the Germans.
Oh, is that it?
Yeah, and 60.
Well, maybe we're not that far off.
That's just Google. That's still a good 20 odd million people, and the UK's taken the title. So wasteful, maybe that's what they're saying about the UK, blowing all their money away they haven't got. when there's interest rates steaming up and energy prices,
everyone's striking, and then when they ain't got any money and going out and buying all these games and whatnot. So it needs to be queried, doesn't it?
Absolutely. 159 million console and PC games were sold across the European markets in 2022, a drop of 7.1% over the year before. Sales of FIFA 23 were up 3% over FIFA 22 year on year. Here's the fucking big one. Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 sales were up nearly 73% over Vanguard.
Yeah. I mean, I'm surprised it's that low, to be honest.
Some cunts still saying, Vanguard wasn't that bad. It wasn't that much of a dip. 73%.
It should be the nail in Sledgehammer's coffin. Like, it really should be. Like, they shouldn't have another go at it after this.
Yes.
It really was a real bad job, unfortunately.
Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, if you combine their sales, because they're separate games, would have charted 6, which would have put it above Legends Arceus. And it's also worth noting that Pokemon games do not include digital sales, so probably would have been higher. So, that game was selling well. That kind of does that. In terms of average digital/physical split, 64% of sales were digital downloads. It's actually a drop because it was 65% in 2021. Not really a drop, is it? 1%. I always think, why include that little... Because that'll be the headline. Digital sales drop!
Yeah.
And then you go, it's 1%. It's almost irrelevant. And they only included games that are sold both physically and digitally, so there wasn't any kind of skewing towards the digital-only titles. Other key sellers of the top 10 include Lego Star Wars at number 8, 3 PlayStation exclusives, They don't need to go any further into that. In terms of countries, UK was the number one, as we know, followed by Germany, then France. Spain, Italy also saw an increase. The UK's best performing market for games such as FIFA, Call of Duty, Lego and Elden Ring. So they were the top games in the UK. Germany and France were the strongest markets for the Switch, with Pokemon Legends Arceus, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, Switch Sports and Pokemon Violet and Scarlet. FIFA 23 was the best-selling game in most markets, with just a couple of exceptions. Finland, where Elden Ring was number one. In terms of console sales, not every major market is tracked. Germany and UK data is missing. So we've got UK data, but it's separate. I don't know why that happens. But Switch was comfortably number one console, despite sales falling by 15%. PS5 was a clear number two, with sales down 35%, and the Xbox Series consoles were the only platform to report sales growth, up 4.4%, but is in third position. So that's a little bit of a... If PS5's down 35%, Phil's gone up 4.4%, which isn't a great deal, it's still up, and still PS5's a clear number two. I mean, that doesn't paint a great picture in Europe, at least, for how well the Xbox is doing, just for consoles coming off the shelf, does it? If PS5 can get away with dropping a third of their sales and then go, well, we're still second.
I still think it's the main console for casual gamers. I think for some reason, and I don't like using that term because it can seem derogatory, but I think most people that aren't that fussed seem to opt for a PlayStation over an Xbox.
Yeah.
I don't know why, to be honest. I'm not sure. There doesn't, to my mind, there's no real difference between the two.
No, well, there was actually a news story that came out from VGC. They used Ampere Analysis, who I've cited previously, and it did say that the survey that they conducted, their market research, showed that PlayStation 5 owners, in the UK at least this is, are more likely to consider it their main console than Xbox Series X owners are, which was interesting. It seemed like there was more people that had a PS5 first and foremost, and then the other consoles were kind of secondary. Which is why when we talk about market leaders and whatnot in the console market, and to me it paints a clear picture why perhaps they get better third-party support for things and can do deals like Final Fantasy 16 being a timed exclusive and all that sort of stuff, because they know that that's at the moment the number one marketplace for those type of games.
Yeah, I think it just surprises me because I buck that trend completely.
It's not just you though; there's lots of people that buck that trend in the.
I just think even when now, like recently, when I try and like Discord connectivity, for example, on the Xbox, is like a game changer for me. Like being able to play with PC players and use a Discord server for audio.
Yeah,
I tried to play with my brother who's got a PlayStation 5 the other day, and I was stuck in game chat, and you just bollocks. And it's just like I'm like, why? I genuinely just think the Xbox just supports cross-party better than PlayStation, and I don't know. I just think
has to though, didn't it? Number 3, struggling.
Yeah, this is what I mean. It just surprises me that all these people just don't seem to care about that. Like, it doesn't even become a factor. But do those sort of people have PC mates they play with, or have?
Probably that's the thing.
This is what I mean.
Probably all on PS5.
Yeah.
That's the thing. I mean, Sony or PlayStation 5 should be getting Discord soon, but first to market was Xbox, and I've not actually used it, but judging by what you said there, it does make things far easier when you're playing with PC folk and whatnot.
It was a bit of a ball ache when they first released it, because you had to transfer it from your mobile.
Yeah.
But they've now just fully integrated it, so you can literally just go straight in on your Xbox into a Discord server. Like, it's having that. I think it'll eventually just make Xbox Party Chat redundant, to be honest, which is fine. But yeah, it's just little things like that on the Xbox that I just prefer, and it just surprised. This is what I mean. I think I'm just out here operating in my own little echo chamber, where I think everyone's doing the same thing, and they're just not. Like, the large majority of the market are doing the opposite.
Is it? I don't know. You don't have to do a war and peace on this, but it's just popped into my head. Is there anything that would come along that would change that? That Xbox was primary and like to switch it? Is there anything that Sony could do or Xbox could blow that would make you do that? Or is it just now that that's how it's going to be, providing things don't shift dramatically, which they might in the next couple of generations, all this streaming malarkey coming in?
So I think that if there was better integration between, you could pretty much interchangeably use whatever console you wanted. Forget first party, third party games and what's available. Like in terms of, if I wanted to play a game, it doesn't really matter. Yeah. Like Call of Duty, I could still play with Pete, all these different people, like it wouldn't matter. It would just come down to cost, features, and performance. Like really, I mean, the reason I use the Xbox as a primary is because you can easily see who's online on your PC friends and stuff, which you just can't have that visibility on the PlayStation. It's just not the same. You can go on the PlayStation app and see your PlayStation mates, and that's it. Like I couldn't easily just see Par online and jump into a game of Warzone together. Like that doesn't happen. So I think if there's better integration with PC,
hackers.
I mean, that is a problem. I mean, it in some ways, it'd be better if those PC mobs just had their own thing and just were completely separate, but that's not the way it's going. No. To be honest, I don't know. I think it would really boil down to, if I had the ability to play whatever I wanted on any platform, I would just buy one console. And it'd literally come down to price and functionality and integration. It'd come down to the minutiae. Yeah. So it could really come down to something like the friends list all being together and Discord connectivity and things like that. It really would be those little things that would make the difference for me.
Well, there you go. That's how it's going to work. We'll see. Things will ultimately shift if the analyst
market
dictates it. Yeah. Well, yeah, and even with like having a console box, I mean, it's been doomed for 10 years if you listen to some people, but you'd think logically one day would get to something where that doesn't occur, and this is all ifs and buts. But anyway, that's a little roundup of the European sales data for 2022. I'll be keeping an eye on Chrissy Drinks if he drops December's only data, and if not, the power rankings are dead. But we will just cover the stats that they chuck out every month because they are interesting. As I say, it keeps us grounded. Naughty Dog says revealing past games too early hurt the studio. They have suggested that it will reveal its next game closer to release than has been the previous case with its recent titles. Uncharted 4 was announced in November 2013 and released in May 2016. The Last of Us Part 2 was announced in 2016 and released in June 2020, following 2 delays. They want to do this to polish the title whilst reducing stress on the team. So I don't really want to talk about the reasoning behind why they're doing it. I think generally, once you let the cat out of the bag, any developer that's got any sort of footprint or people know that work there are going to get hounded every day by strange people saying, "Where is it? What are you doing?" And it's just an annoyance, isn't it? You don't need. So their rationale's fine. If they feel like it's going to reduce stress, great. But the real question is, using the news to springboard into something hopefully more interesting, what is your ideal schedule for game reveals, promotion, and eventually release? Like how early would you like to see games yourself? Not from a business point of view, because we've got really no clue how that cycle works. There's no, as far as I know, there's no data saying, well, if you reveal it 2 years before and build it up, you get these sales. Like it seems generally a game by game basis. But for you as a consumer, when would you like to know about your games and then be able to play them? Are you one of these people that would like, well, give me 3 months notice and I'll dive in? Or do you want to know a year in advance or 2 years in advance and have a slow build of features and gameplay rolled out? You tell me. I don't really know. I think it depends. It would depend on the game. So if it's a yearly release title, then clearly I don't want to know about that. I don't want to know what they're working on 3 years in advance. Because there's no point. It really does depend. So using GTA 6 as an example, right? I know they're working on it. Yeah, fine. Don't have to. I just need to know when you're going to release it. You don't have to commit to anything. Just give me a year's notice or 6 months notice. It's irrelevant. It's like when it comes out, I'm going to play it. I know it's going to be good. Fine. There's no point in me showing me something now and then going, you'll get to play this in 4 years. So I'll be like, why are you even bothering? It doesn't matter to me. I'll forget about it.
So I think the ideal time horizon is probably 6 to 12 months. Like, show me something 6 to 12 months in advance, and I'll remember it, log it, and get excited for it. I can understand why companies don't want to commit to things. I don't think it's the problem. I think, using Naughty Dog as an example, is they probably committing to dates, or will release it in this quarter, in this year or something, and then they're under pressure to get it released on that date.
Yeah.
Whereas if you 3 years in advance say coming in, if they announced it now, said coming in 2026, you go, all right.
Yeah.
Like it's up to you really. This within their gift. But from my perspective, I think 6 to 12 months is the sweet spot for me. Being able to get excited, lining it up, and then sort of also, and I'm also thinking about the Fantasy Gaming League. I'm like,
yeah,
there's no point in telling me 2 years in advance. I need to know the prior year so I can think about it for next year.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I tend to agree that 12 months, I don't like any longer than that, really. I mean, most games, we're saying 6 to 12 months. Most games are way out. They're normally like a couple of years. And you get a review, you get a title first. That's kind of like, oh, we're working on it type, which I don't mind. What I hate is the CGI trailers that don't actually show anything of the game, really. Everyone goes, oh, you get the atmosphere and the time. No, you don't. You don't get nothing out of that. Look at that Halo 5 Guardians trailer. It plays nothing like that. Then they did those weird trailers where, like, Master Chief and Agent Locke, Spartan Locke, were, like, killing each other. Don't even happen in the game. There's nothing to do. It's not even none of those scenarios play out. So that sort of nonsense needs to stop. And it's really tricky, though, isn't it? Because you think how complex it is to develop and ship one of these games. Like, just use God of War Ragnarok. It's like, how do you really know when that's going to be ready? Like, whenever you say a year, even, you're sort of saying, well, ideally, if we don't get 75% of the way through this and then discover this horrible bug that costs us a month's worth of time, then yeah, we'll get it out. But if something like that happens, we're going to be blowing. So I would tend to agree. A year out gives me enough time to plan it in. 6 months is fine as well. I think Bethesda used to do that until they started putting fucking dates in their trailers over a year out and then missing that date. And you think, well, what are we doing there, you prats? And but I think what Naughty Dog are saying here is like, yeah, let's just rein it in a little bit. Let's not get so, we need to show this immediately, because the hype's going to come naturally anyway. A year is plenty of time for people to get excited about The Last of Us Part 3. Like, it doesn't need any more than that. Right.
Yeah, I think if they want to let people know we're working on things and it's in the mixer, fine. But you don't have to commit to anything beyond that, I don't think, until sort of 6 to 12 months out. And they might get asked questions about it and go, look, you said to us 6 years ago you're working on a new Uncharted game, what's going on? And they'll go, well. Yeah. But I think it's just around... I don't know why people feel the need to say coming in such and such, so far out. It's just like, tell us you're working on it. And then when you're ready to sort of think about a release date and show us some teasers and whatnot, then do that a year out.
So that's what annoys you more, is them saying, here's what we're working on, here's what we're aiming for. If they just said, we're working on it, leave us alone, that's almost okay, because they're not really telling you to get excited. They're just letting you know that their next game's going to...
Yeah, and I know it's in the mixer. Yeah. It's kind of like, okay, well, at some point... So, again, going back to GTA 6, I know that's coming at some point. I don't really know when it's coming. It will come when it's ready. Fine. Like, I'm okay with that. They did the same with Red Dead Redemption 2. They were like, we're working on it. Yeah. You can have it when it's ready. And I did.
Yep.
And that's fine. Like, I don't need... I feel like some companies, I don't know whether it's to meet sales targets or, there's share price things involved where they need to make certain PR announcements to get share prices up. I don't know whether they do it for those sort of reasons, but purely from my perspective, I don't need you to tell me when it's coming. Like Halo, as a prime example, I wish you'd have left it. And, like... You shouldn't have delivered that when you did. Like, you committed to something, you felt under pressure, and at least something that's really flopped, and you didn't listen to the community, and now it's shit, and it's in the bins, basically. And it's just a prime example of committing to things and delivering something that wasn't ready. I've said it all along, just give it to me when you think it's ready. Don't do it to meet arbitrary dates.
No, and that's that. Well, look, let's transition out of this stuff and get into some impressions. We're going to talk about New World, the Amazon MMO with Mr. Paper. The reason I wanted to get this one up is because I've been talking to Paper offline, and there may be some more MMO impressions coming down the pipe. We're just sort of lining things up. He's back on that train. So that's what's coming to close out this edition of the podcast. Obviously, if you've made it this far, we thank you for your time. If live streams are more your thing, though, twitch.tv/dimpdigital. You can hear Logan in the chat sometimes when he's playing with Hall, getting stressed or, getting flustered.
It's a stressful experience.
It's
a stressful experience for them morons at times.
You get to hear Pa, you get to hear Kebab Man, Pee-wee. There's all sorts of little characters that pop up in those live streams, and sometimes I do it. But twitch.tv/dimpdigital, you can head over to do that and follow us. And we don't have any schedule, so don't feel like we're actually going to tell you when we're going to stream. You'll literally get a notification. If you're there, you're there, and if you're not, you've missed out. And then you can give us your Twitch Prime whilst you're there as well. Help us out. Buy a couple of beers. But that's it. We'll transition over to New World with myself and Mr. Paper, and we'll see you on the other side. Here we are then, back with some game impressions to close out this edition of Idle Game Chat. I'm joined by Mr. Paper, a very rare appearance that you're making on the podcast these days, but we're here to talk about New World, the MMO from Amazon Games that actually released last year. It's over a year since the game came out, and we finally got through the MSQ, the vanilla MSQ, up to a certain point for you, which we will explain. But we've got through it. Anyway, welcome back. Good to see and speak to you.
No worries. I think apart from, the big drafts and game quizzes and stuff like that, this might be the first time I've actually come on here to talk about computer games. That's how I'm rattling my head to think, have I been on here before?
Valheim.
Oh, we did have a Valheim, but how long ago was that? That's a couple of years ago.
Yeah, it was almost longer. It was almost, if not 2 years ago. So, absolutely was a long time ago. But this is the New World MMO, Bezos territory. Now, before we get into New World itself, we've both played this. Both played a lot of it. I've done 88 hours, and I think, what did you say, 110 hours that you've done?
110, yeah.
110 hours, so more than enough time, really. And this came out September of 2021, so over a year old at this stage as we record and as this goes out. But that's how long it kind of took us to get through the MSQ, because we played it at launch a fair old bit, then stopped, then played again for a bit, then stopped, and then finally in this last kind of phase got to max level and ticked off as much as we kind of could. But before we get into New World, I think it would be useful for the audience to understand your kind of history with MMOs, because it's a very specific genre and something that people seem to either love or hate. But we all know that Guild Wars 2 is your jam, and then we've got New World coming out. So tell us a little bit about MMOs and why you spend so much time with perhaps Guild Wars and what your other experiences with other MMOs have been.
Yeah, no, sure. So Guild Wars is, as you put it, my jam. Like, that is a game that I've spent the most amount of time in out of any computer game that I've ever played. I've come up for about 1,000 hours in the game, so it works out just over roughly about maybe 120 hours a year I put into that, if you break it down to when I started playing it. But I just love the fact that I can keep going back to it, and there's stuff to progress. There's consistently new stuff that's always appearing, and I can be invested in the lore, and I can dive into it for 2-3 months and get really into it, get burnt out a bit and go and take a bit of a break, and then something new drops, and then I can get massively back invested back into it again. And so I must admit, I'm a sucker for like the story element of MMOs, strange to think about, considering that MMOs, a lot of people's like get to end game and grind and whatever and stuff like that.
Yep.
And there are MMOs out there that are like Black Desert Online, WoW, lots. And I've played them all, not massively, but like jumped in them, and I've always sort of found myself sort of struggling to get really into it. Whereas somewhere like Guild Wars had a really good story, and therefore I was consistently going back into it and consistent expansions and so forth. And that's, I think, what MMOs do really well. It's a bit like you love Horizon, and when they dropped that first expansion, you jumped straight back into it because you wanted to get back into that world. Well, it's exactly the same with MMOs, really. That expansion drops or that new content drops, and you're like, I want to get back into that world because there's something new to explore, and I enjoyed my time there before. So I really got that. And the other thing I really like is you can sort of set yourself goals in it, because there's so much to do. There's too much to do, to be honest. And there will be people out there that are just mad and can just spend their whole time in there getting to really high specs and whatever it is and completing lots of achievements within the game. But I just like the ability to say there's a long-term goal that I can set, and I can try and get there maybe over 3-4 months. Maybe I'm creating a legendary, and there's people that can probably create legendaries in like less than a week or less than a day or whatever. Whereas for me, it's just that longer process. I can log on. I don't have loads of time, so I log on maybe 1 hour, 2 hours in an evening, a couple of times a week, just sort of slowly progress it. And then that joy of getting to that, little checkpoint towards the end, and you've got this new legendary weapon or you've unlocked a mount, is really appealing for me. So yeah, MMOs, I like the fact that they're just longevity. You're not going to finish it, and then you're going to have to wait for the next release, like say God of War, for example, that's coming out very recently. That's just recently dropped the next I was going to say expansion. It's not expansion, the next game, but you had to wait for that to get back.
4.5 years I had to wait for that.
Exactly. Whereas for 4.5 years I've spent 400 hours in Guild Wars, going back in and doing small little bits of content updates rather than just one great big story as we go. And so that is why, for me, MMOs really work, is that consistent drip feed of things you can do. And as I said, I like the story element of it, so that's why Guild Wars me. But they do it in lots of like new gear drops, new dungeons, and for all sorts of MMOs. And as I said, I've touched on WoW, I've done Black Desert Online, doing a bit of Star Trek Online at the moment. I've done RuneScape old school. I've a bunch of others. I really want to give Final Fantasy a whirl. Lots of people have been banging on that. That's a really good story driven content one. But yeah, that's sort of, for me, the reason why I wanted to go into New World was because I was like, this is the next big MMO, I want to give it a go. And I think that was one of my regrets, that when Guild was, I've played it a lot and I'm quite high in it and whatever and stuff like that, I didn't play it from day one. No. I missed out on the first couple of years. I think actually you and Loading got me into it. You and Loading brought the game on disc, and then me and Hall followed suit. But I've always, for that point, wanted to be in an MMO from day one, and I've never had the opportunity. So, New World come along, and there's a few others coming up. There's the Riot MMO, potentially on people's radar. There's Ashes of Creation, that's on people's radars. They're meant to be really good MMOs upcoming, but they're years away. Yeah. And that's the problem with MMOs. One good one drops every few years, if that. And so it's you have to jump on it when it comes, otherwise you might miss the hype train.
Yeah, it's true that the opportunities for MMOs getting at the ground level certainly don't appear as often as people might expect. It felt like there was a while, it was probably 5, maybe longer, 6, 7, 8 years ago, well, even before that there was a lot that tried their luck and kind of fell away and didn't have much longevity. But it certainly is appealing. I'm almost not opposite to you, but I've tried Guild Wars. I've only tried Guild Wars. I tried WoW for a little bit. There was a little free up to first 20 levels. I think we played with Dave one time.
We did Elder Scrolls as well.
Elder Scrolls Online. Oh yes, yeah, that as well. Which I actually got through the vanilla campaign of that as well. So that's kind of where I'm at. But people who listen or watch regularly know that single player stuff's usually where I go, but I do occasionally like to do some multiplayer, and MMO's an interesting way to spend it. As to why New World ended up with me, it's because you bought it for me. Pissed up, I think.
I was in that state where I'd had a few drinks and I was like, I want to drag someone in on this journey. I think much like you, and I knew you wouldn't buy it yourself.
No.
And you probably wouldn't be as eager to jump in an MMO unless it was free, pretty much.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
a bunch of people were doing it, and you felt like you had to. I thought, as I said, we don't get very many opportunities where big AAA MMOs drop, or should be AAA MMOs drop. And I thought, you should at least experience the journey once. You don't have to do it again.
No.
But you'll have that with you for the rest of your life, and you've now got
I'll have the scars with me for the rest of my life. You mean? Yeah.
It's worth it for this call.
No, exactly. Much as I take the piss, I did appreciate that, and dived in. So in terms of our progress, we both hit max level. There is essentially there's like an MSQ like there is in many of these games. There's tons of side quests. There's factions and other different specialities that you can level up, whether it's crafting, whether it's hunting, smithing, all that sort of stuff is there. But in terms of our progress, we kind of got through the main MSQ. There's one sort of expedition, which is basically a dungeon, for lack of a better term, which requires a multi-person team at the back end of that, which I have done. I'll explain kind of the process of that later on, because it was interesting to go through that using their kind of group finder. You have not done that because there's no solo option as we record this to kind of finish that off, which is a bit of a blower, and it's reliant on end game kind of leveling, which changes once you hit level 60. So that's just a bit of context of where we got to and how much we played. And as I said, you've got the hours. Let's start really broadly. What about New World did you like? What was the things that you felt like it did right? And I should say there's been a recent expansion that's come out, the Brimstone Sands, I think it's called. I think you've spent maybe a little bit of time with it, but we're not going to talk about that. This is purely a scope of like the main vanilla campaign. And they've also changed the way that the campaign or the MSQ operates from level 1 to 25. We didn't experience that. We were there from day one and played it throughout the year, so we kind of missed that. So this is a view from that perspective, but just thought I'd sneak that in there. Anyway, New World, what did you like?
Yeah, no, that's good context. New World, would I like? To be honest, I as we went through this, I updated my PC, my rig.
Yeah.
And before it was a bit of a slug, and everything was on low, and now everything's on ultra. So as I've got myself a nice rig, the graphics in the game are, for an MMO standard, are brilliant. And the fact that you just pretty much look around and go, well, I want to go over there, and you go over there. It does feel like that whole sort of massive open world that you'd get on like a GTA or a Red Dead Redemption, in terms of like you just look around, you look at that really tall tower and one side of the world, you'd be like, right, I'm going to go over to that tower and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So visually, I thought they did a really good job, and they did a really good job on some of the visual mechanics around like cutting trees and rocks and stuff like that. I felt like the fact that when you cut a tree it would fall over and it looked like it. And the thing is, I was on it about a week ago or something like that, just doing something. I can't remember what I was doing, but I remember I was in one of the settlements, and I just remember seeing through a corner of a house on a settlement just a tree fall over.
Yeah.
And that's all I could see. And I was, or like the corner of a tree fall over, and I was like, oh, there's a player out there chopping that. And it was just like that those little things that you're like, there's someone over on the other side of the settlement I can't really see. I can't see them at all, and they've just chopped a tree down. I've just seen it out of my peripheral, and that was just like, it sort of brings it home. It brings it to life a little bit more, and so I really appreciated that side of things. The other thing I really liked about the game, well, there's a couple of other things, but one was I enjoyed the leveling of the crafting and the like log cutting and material gathering and stuff like that. I'm sometimes a bit of a sucker, and I often Google what's the most chilled game I can play, and Stardew Valley always pops up. But there's something to be said about like, right, I'm going to spend the next couple of hours just gathering some logs, leveling up my logging, and just doing what I need to do for my next level of crafting and stuff like that. And so it sort of, as long as you're in a relatively, you're over leveled in your safe sort of area, you can sort of switch your brain off and really go to it, and it feels very intuitive. You can pretty much take out all rocks and pick up all pebbles and take down all trees and pick up all herbs you see and so forth. And I really enjoyed sort of like that relaxed element of the game, which I got a lot of at the start. Because like there were just times when like maybe we weren't in together and we didn't want to progress too fast, and I was like saying, "Oh, I'm just gonna go off and just do some cutting of some logs for a couple of hours," and I just it's just nice. Didn't think too hard and just went and did it. And I know a lot of people have sort of said that was one of the elements of the game that they've sort of upped the standard for, at least their MMO perspective around sort of the crafting and the gathering for future MMOs moving forward. So that was a nice thing.
Yeah.
And in the final one for me, so the three was the visual stuff, the sort of craft and gathering, and then 2 was sort of like the combat. I felt was quite you know, you get a lot of tab targeting in MMOs and so forth. This was designed or stated before that, you know, this is going to be like Bloodborne level of combat. I probably wouldn't go as that far, but it definitely had elements to it where you had hard encounters. Like there was many times where me and you were running away from bosses because they were just elites or whatever, and we had to be waiting for, you know, tagging up with a couple of other people close to us to take down a boss and stuff like that. And sometimes we just have to level up and then come back a bit later and sort it out. It was so for me, like the combat felt, you know, intuitive enough. I play heals. And it's very easy just to miss your heals, and I guess it's from any ranged weapon. If you're not actually accurate with your ranged weapon, if you've not got crosshairs on it, you're gonna miss. And like, you know, there's a lot of games out there that sort of make that easier for you. If you're firing that direction, you know, lock on and stuff like Guild Wars is pretty like that. You know, if I'm firing in a certain direction, I know I'm not going to be missing in the open world and stuff like that. And so I thought that was a really nice level of combat. So yeah, for me, like those were the sort of really key things. There was a couple of other nice little bits, but like for me, those were the key 3 things I really enjoyed from New World.
Yeah, the combat is definitely, and again, my experience is pretty limited, but you know, like you said, the tab targeting is not a thing really in New World to a certain extent. And I had the musket, which I was using, which I know you love the sound of, but didn't find much practical use for it. And again, yeah, you're right, it's free aim. You have to make sure you hit the target. But also, they had critical points on the enemies. You know, if you hit them in the head, you'd see more damage pop up and things like that. So there was an element of, in my previous experience, like you say, it's normally just aim towards them and you'll do, you know, the RNG will decide whether you get a critical hit or not, whereas there was a way of kind of being able to manufacture that yourself by aiming for specific, you know, points of the body and whatnot. And it did feel a bit more robust in that sense. And then going back to your other point about the gathering, I remember very early on, it must have been in the opening 10 hours or so, again, I'd gone on my own, and I got a town board request to go and get some green wood. And I remember just going out to, like, just literally outside the settlement, there's a shitload of trees there. I just went out there and was like chopping them down. And I was like, I don't know why, I just found this really therapeutic, just chopping these trees down. And then I saw my little level going up for, you know, chopping. And I was like, oh, there's like another little element here. And I'm going to get these 50 bits of wood and take it back and get some money and XP. And there was something nice to that loop where I wasn't, at that point, there was no real goal in mind. I was just kind of just exploring and doing things that I ran across and thinking, oh, that sounds interesting or at least doable. And they make things easy as well. Like if you get a request to like target or kill certain enemies, they are highlighted in the world with a little yellow or blue icon. So you're not forever messing around trying to make sure you're killing the right enemies or killing the right wildlife or whatnot. And they actually, in a recent update, added that a step further with the chest gathering. Some of the requests to do chest gathering actually appear with a little icon there, so you don't miss them, because they actually were very easy to miss. I remember there's a few times when we were running around in a hostile area and we were missing one chest, and we couldn't find this one chest, and it's because it was just in a room that we just glanced over. But definitely the combat and those gathering parts I found interesting and somewhat engaging. Now, look, for those that play any level of single player game, the mechanics are not close to any of those, unfortunately. But I think it's good to recognise that in the sort of MMO space, they were doing some good things on that from that perspective, because they're clearly different types of games and have different compromises. And in this case, they've done a good job overall. Let's move into stuff perhaps that you didn't like. What were... Maybe you liked everything. Maybe you got no issues. But what did you have any issues with the game itself that either you immediately noticed or over time became tired or sick of? Because, as you said, you can burn yourself out on these games, and that's probably why it took us over a year to get to max level, because we got burnt out at least 2 or 3 times during that year.
Yeah. I'll limit myself to 3. Like, I gave you three things I like.
All
I gave
right.
you 3 I won't like. There could probably be more, and as I said, there was more things that I liked, but it's probably good to limit yourself. So I guess the first one was that sort of new player experience. That we say I've done 110 hours and you've done 80. I wonder how many of those are because we sat in a queue waiting to get in. And
Oh, fucking
so
hell, I forgot about that.
And so I guess this comes with a couple of things. One is, they weren't prepared for the demand up front, and then when it died out, the amount of server shifting that they did and mucking around sort of didn't make me feel invested in my area. And so as I said, that waiting, I was waiting in queues for 4 hours at a time sometimes to get in, and I'd start it earlier, maybe 1-2 in the afternoon while I was at work. You put it on to the side, and you carry on working. You'd be like, right, I know I'll get in roughly around then you get kicked out of the queue, and then you'd have to go to the back of the line. That was frustrating, and they did fix that bug, but just the whole waiting to get in was just a bit of a shit show, really. And then, as I said, you'd get in, and then you'd go around certain areas, and because there's people that have got in that can just, I don't know, leave their computer running all the time or whatever, because they're not going to disappear for a couple of hours and come back.
Yeah, they didn't want to get back in the queue, did they?
No, so they would just have auto run on and be running into a wall and stuff like that. And little things like that, I would be going around the world. It would just wind me up and really take me out of my experience, because I was and they were gaming the system. The system allowed them to game it, so it's Jeff's fault. But it's ultimately I just kept finding myself being distracted from my enjoyment because of the queues, and then seeing how people would game in it, and I was determined not to be one of those people that gamed it, and I didn't. I reported everyone that did game it, just that gave me that little buzz of just nothing probably happened of it, but it's just I felt a little bit better in myself, a bit like Neighborhood Watch, the nosy neighbor,
cleaning up the New World servers for all those people gaming the system.
Exactly. Who's the real villain? But it's that for me, that sort of took some of the shine. At the start, don't get me wrong, day 1, day 2, it was a bit whoa, everyone wants to go in, look how popular it is.
This is promising.
This is really promising, stuff like that. But by end of week 1, week 2 and stuff like that, when this is still going on, you're I've lost that hype and that buzz around sort of being in a queue for 4 hours. I can get away with it from day 1 or 2, but once it's gone past that point, I was just gone with it. So for me, that sort of queue system was and getting in really, and then the server shuffling really sort of wound me up, because ultimately I have no idea what server I'm in now.
No, I don't.
I just doing it. And then I think on point 2, in terms of that server shuffling, some of the faction stuff, I think the faction stuff's a really good idea, and the way they do it's really good. But the problem is, because they've done all the server shuffling and stuff like that, we were a faction that isn't very popular on that server through the shuffle, and we therefore had no territory. And so for me, then you just consistently lose out on all the perks that you get on settlements. It's harder to gather people together to fight in the wars and stuff like that. I must admit that's something we haven't done, and we probably should go back and have a go at doing some of that stuff, the PvP open world stuff. But because of the situation we're in, it was but now we've got to end game level and stuff like that. There's no real will to go and do it, because we're clearly not a big enough faction on that server. Now there's only 3, and you'd think that they probably just need to do bit better of leveling, like so you can only have so many. I don't know what it is.
Maybe they should have only had 2 factions.
Maybe
like
that
Horde and Alliance, like they do in WoW. It's just like.
Because then you're gonna always have it back and forth. But once you get 3, and it's the same in Guild Wars when they did the World. If you used to back in the day, when you used to do the World versus World server, and you're on a server, if you're on a poor World versus World server, you may as well just not play the World versus World game. And that's what I sort of feel like in New World. I may as well just not jump into getting to, because if we're going to go and do it, we're going to get dicked anyway.
Yeah.
If we get one up, and so like I've sort of been like whatever, and it's like we're missing out on the little free daily things that you get from some settlements that you own, like some raw hide or whatever.
Yeah, I couldn't pick up my little freebies. I saw all these other people getting them, and I was like, I need raw hide. Fuck's sake.
It is frustrating. So that was number 2, and then my third one, and this is probably the most damning of the lot, is I didn't enjoy the MSQ. So for me, like the story, they didn't do it in a way that I found engaging. I think they did it. They had an MSQ where it was linear and you followed it through to the end, and that's fine. And that's what a lot of MMOs do. But like I sort of judge it against some of the MMOs that I like in terms of story, like the Guild Wars, where I feel like I've become a lot more invested in it, and I feel that they do certain things because of that. So ultimately, I knew I would go to that whoever I need to talk to at the MSQ. I'd press F really quickly to get through the story. I'd let you update me if there was anything important.
Well,
I say,
to be fair, they had voice lines.
That was good, and that's a light tick that they did some voice line and stuff like that. But the problem is they never made anything meaningful in the story. So you never got to a place, and then there's something like, and then you went into a massive cutscene, and you're like, whoa, and like there's this thing happening or whatever, and so you're like, whoa, like there's this big monster, or like you saw when you found out the old Croc had died. I forgot his name, but spoilers alerts. But I'm assuming I haven't got to spoil it for anyone now. But I
don't even know if that happens in the new camp. They may have changed it. This is the thing.
But even that, you could have an amazing little cutscene of him like laying on the floor. So I was like, go help and stuff like that, and he dies or whatever. And because he's been such an integral part of the story, but it wasn't. It's just like someone just was in the voice like, oh yeah, he's dead or whatever. He's disappeared.
Yeah.
Like it's just you lose that level of meaning, and so they definitely needed to enrich their main story quests with like a bit more storytelling rather than just being like we're going to voice act over side quests, because ultimately it may as well just been a really long side quest where you just walked your way through it and just go to this place, go to that place, X, Y, and Z, and you're getting things along the way, because ultimately you could F it all, and then you could just go over to the area where you need it. And it's the same as any other side quest, where it's either kill 6 of these or 10 of those, or kill this main boss, or pick up these things out of these chests. And I'm struggling to rack my brain of anything else different that might have happened. There was I'll get some materials and stuff like that, but really it's like that was it. And so I knew that out of the 5 things I could be doing, it's going to be one of them. So after the first 20 levels, you sort of like, well, it's always the same, so you just skip through it and just go off and do it like you would with a side quest. So for me, like, if they wanted me to be invested in the lore of the land, so that I would go off and go and do some of the side quests, go, oh, that's really interesting because I was doing this, and I can understand why that boat had sunk because I'm now dealing with this guy, or whatever. Or whatever, I'd have been more up for that. But yeah, for me, like, they just didn't put enough effort into that MSQ to really pull me in to say I'm invested in the new world lore. Like, I have a vague idea of what's going on, but I don't.
I listened to all that dross and I still didn't know what was going on half the time. But I listened to, I reckon, 95% of the voice lines. The only time I skipped it was when it wouldn't let me listen to it without skipping, because I had an affliction that was like 400 seconds. So I was getting health drops every 10 seconds, and it wasn't enough time to let the voice lines run through. But I had no idea what was going on. I was just like, well, we've just got to go here, paper, and kill this person that's just appeared or whatever it might be. It definitely wasn't the most engaging on that front, for sure. So we did a couple of expeditions with Dave, and I think Chris might have even jumped in once or twice, and that's because at some point during the journey, the MSQ was locked behind doing a dungeon or an expedition. Now, they did actually update the game as we were playing through it to offer solo options. So rather than doing the dungeon as a group, so if you were a solo player, you could go off and kind of at least do the MSQ without needing that. What did you think of that addition? I mean, it wasn't there day one, but it was a good 4 or 5 months into it. But I think we found that was a good compromise to have in the game sort of towards the back end, because us trying to get together an expedition group was always difficult. They added a group finder, which I did use for the final dungeon, which was actually worked pretty well. But failing that, it was just easier for us to just do the solo stuff together, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think, if there's a lesson learned for any future MMO developers is, the casual single player-ish, or maybe 1 or 2 players, is a really important part of their, structure. There will be, and we've been recently watching. We shared a video about how single players in MMOs are actually important. And there's a line in one of those videos that we're sharing about these players are really important. They want to go off and do it and play on their own or play with one another and stuff like that. And yes, give them the option to come together with a group if they want to do something, and give them the opportunity to do that. But they're not always going to want to do that. So don't gatekeep getting to end game for that. And I think that's the big thing with New World is they put a gatekeep really early onto New World, whereas if you're a single player, and especially without Find a Bloody Group, which is literally integral to Find a Group, you go back to the old sort of WoW days, and everyone goes, it's great and stuff like that. But ultimately, back in the WoW days, you had to stand outside a dungeon and say, hey, is there any healers? Is there any tanks? And you had to just keep putting in chat until someone just joined, and you could end up, spending hours just waiting for people to get into that dungeon.
Yeah.
That's fine when you're 15, 16 years old and you're going to school and you got time to think. But when you get older into your 30s like us and you've got things going on or other commitments you want to do, it's just not possible. So, for me, the fact that they added that single story element onto those was good at that point. I think, the way I sort of play these things anyway is I like to single player through the stories when they drop and come out and so forth, or go through it with someone else. But then I like to go back and do some of the more group content later when I feel like I've really understood the game a bit more, and I understand what my role is in the game, and therefore I feel like I can enjoy a dungeon. And as you said, we did do a dungeon. I thought actually those were some of the better content pieces of the game once we got in there with a group. There's some interesting puzzles, and there was some interesting boss fights and so forth, and some mechanics, which is all what dungeons should be about. But don't force that on me at specific times. Let me decide when I want to go and do that. And if I don't want to do that, and there'll be plenty of people out there that probably don't, just let them go past it and enjoy your game. Because otherwise, you've just lost them at that point, and they'll go off and play something else. And then you've lost the opportunity to upsell and all that type of stuff that MMOs do. Yeah, no, I mean, it seems... I'm still surprised that they've offered a solo option for every single quest other than the final one. It's like I somewhat get that though, because you've sort of, and maybe we'll come on to this conversation in a minute, but you sort of you've got to max level at that point, so I sort of get it. But I don't know. I mean, you can do it. Like I said, I use the group finder for that, and it's really useful in that you can create... I joined a lobby, first of all, and we failed badly, and there was finger pointing. I was clearly not pulling my weight, and I was like, well, that's costly. I was like, make sure you eat. And I was like, I'm eating, you fucking idiots. But, you have to you're getting those squabbles, unfortunately. Anyway, it all failed. And then I thought, well, you know what? I'll just create a lobby and see what happens. And you can actually put a note to say what the lobby's looking for. So I put solo player looking to go through dungeon first time. It shows my level, said not very good. Help if would be appreciated. And within 10 minutes, there were 4 others that came in, all pretty good level, all knew what they were doing, came in, and we smashed through it in 40 minutes. And I was like, that worked really well. It shows that group finder at least works really well. So I felt quite fortunate there, but I still feel like there should be an option where me and you could have just done that through a quest through a dungeon of sorts that didn't require
everyone to like three others to make up the numbers, because it's just not possible to do that without a well prepared group. Like, I know there's psychopaths that have done it solo. I've seen the videos, but the general person, you're not going to get through that without a good group of, you know, highly leveled people. You could probably carry one person, which was me in this case. You're trying to carry like 2 or 3, and you're just not going to get through it. So it just feels a bit strange to have offered that option for every other kind of point in the quest, and then at the back end just gone, nah. And let's not forget, when the game wasn't finished when it first launched either. I didn't know this until Dave told us, but there was a good 6 months where the final expedition wasn't even available. Like, it just sort of, the MSQ ended saying, oh, right, we'll get prepared for that. And then that was it. Everyone thought it was bugged. I was looking in the Reddit threads and I was like, is it bugged? And I was like, no, it's just, it ends there. So they made a bit of a hash of that, in my opinion. And I think there's a longer conversation we could have about solo playing in MMOs, because I think on reflection, not that it's anyone's fault, but playing it in a group and playing it with the intention to get through the MSQ, which is basically how I positioned it, was probably the wrong thing to do. Because actually, when I was just going off on my own, doing stuff that wasn't necessarily advancing my level, but was just either exploring or doing like the odd quest, was actually probably the more fulfilling time. Some of the more fulfilling times in the nearly 90 hours I spent. So that's another conversation for another day, I think, in terms of how to cater for those players and, you know, how useful they are. I think even in Final Fantasy, they've started to implement co-op or like NPCs to come with you on certain quests so that people can go through it together. I think it's a growing request from player bases that don't want to. It seems mad, doesn't it? If you play an MMO but you don't want to play with other people, and it's like, yeah, but I just don't want. I like the backdrop of the world being alive, but I don't want to be pushed into groups with people like I did that first time, where it's just squabbling.
So there was there's an MMO, Guild Wars 1, so before Guild Wars 2, where it was like you would effectively build up some henchmen and stuff like that with you, and they would go into the world with you and take on the quest with you. So you wouldn't be going alone, you'd be going with NPCs, but there'd be NPCs of your choice and so forth. And there's definitely something to be said about that, though. When you did go off into them to do the quests, it would be in an instance where there wouldn't be any other players at that moment. Correct. But when you'd go back to like the towns and stuff like that, then it was just full of, you know, just everyone else just doing their thing. And so I definitely think there is something for that. I also agree with you. I think I would actually say the way we started playing New World was more enjoyable than the way we finished it. Whereas 100%. You know, we got to the point where we're just like, right, let's just crack it out and do it and stuff like that. Whereas that's really the wrong. We're just trying to get to the levels up as quick as possible and stuff like that to get through content. Whereas, you know, ultimately. And I think sometimes this is just a predicament with MMOs in general, because everyone says end game, the whole way through, get to the end. Yeah. But actually, even if I look back at something like Guild Wars, the times I enjoyed most was when I was leveling 0 to 80 and I was exploring new parts of the world that I'd never seen before, and I was like, wow, and stuff like that. And actually, should be the same with New World. And those early points when we're just going out, the problem with New World was they didn't start off with a very good job. Everything felt very cut and paste, and if they'd improved that, where you actually felt like you was getting variety going around, you would have got a lot more of that, you know, I can take my time as I level. And I think maybe that, you know, MMOs in general should just be a bit more okay, or allowing people to level slowly and just enjoy the game, because I think that's fun. Because ultimately, if you just gone around doing side quests, you know, even just half the side quest, you would get level 60 at no point anyway. So it is just what it is. But it's, you know, it caters for allowing everyone to play it differently. I just think we maybe finished on maybe the wrong way to play it, for us anyway. Maybe for some people that's really important to get to the end game because they want to do lots of the PvE
or whatever, or PvP,
stuff like that.
Or want to grind the dungeons or whatever it might be.
Yeah, for us, the PvP stuff is probably one of the least important things. So the PvE stuff, we probably should have just tried to enjoy a little bit more. Yeah,
because once you get to level 60, which is the highest level at the moment, the leveling then switches to gear score, which means each individual piece of gear has a number, and you know, you over time you either buy or procure new bits of that's higher, and it builds up your gear score, etc. I think Dave was saying there's like a watermark system where you can only go 1 or 2 levels above your current level, and there's an expertise. I didn't really understand the end game at all, I'll be honest, and I didn't spend a great deal of time studying it. But I remember I read one article, and I still I don't understand this. So I just went and bought stuff from the trading post and got close to what I needed to be, and then I was ready to kind of do that expedition and whatnot.
I generally think, before you move on, that's probably a case with a lot of MMOs. Once you get to that higher end level and you're starting to worry about gear scores and stuff like that, I think it happens in all MMOs. Yeah. It can be a little bit complex, especially when you've got to do that and think of a build that you want to go after, because there's usually hundreds and builds, and there's definitely ones that are better for meta at that moment in time and stuff like that. And then you got it does become slightly confusing. Some people get it straight away. I must admit, I'm a bit like you, where I don't really get it super quick, and so unless I'm spending a bit of time invested in it and figuring it out, I find it goes over my head a little bit.
Yeah, I had no real desire to do it, other than I knew I had to get to a certain level to be able to not get one-shotted in the end game areas. So that was the reason why I did it. Well, I think that caps off most of maybe not everything. I'm sure we could sit here and talk for another hour actually about this game and many of the games that we talk about, but we have to call time at some point. We do the Dimp Digital Gaming Gallery now. So this is an opportunity for you to recognise the games that you're playing. We've got a shared gallery, and you have your own sort of gaming showcase within that. But the question is whether New World for you is even going to go in the gallery. So we're kind of like parked outside. It's cold out there at the moment. Temperatures have dropped. We don't even have to get out of the car. You can sit here now and say, look, thanks, nice knowing you, New World, but I'm not going to put you in the gallery. I don't want my name attached to this particular game in any form. So I guess the first question is this got a chance of going into your personal showcase within the gallery?
So if you look at pure investment, I've played 110 hours, you played nearly 90. For me personally, will I go back into it again? Probably. I want to experience some of the expansion and see what it's a bit like. I want to go around the world and stuff like that. And I do want to go back and do some of the the expeditions. Yeah. As long as we got the right group together. Like, I don't really want to do it with random people. I'd like to have, the lads. So for me, yes, it probably will go into the vault, or the gaming gallery, shall I say, because through pure fact, the amount of time we spent on something, and I don't feel it's finished yet. Yeah. Maybe that's the whole thing with MMOs; it's never really finished. But I feel like there's still some things I would like to go back in and do, and I'll do them when my head's not burnt out with it, if that makes sense. Yeah. Yeah. For me, says it's therefore got a place in my gaming gallery. All
right. Well, for me, I'm not going to put it in. I can't have the stink of New World attached to me. I mean, there were several times, and I was playing up because we streamed a lot of it as well. But I'd say this is the worst gaming experience of my entire life. There were times when I couldn't bear to play the game anymore. And that may be my own fault. And we go back to the priorities we put on leveling and getting through the MSQ, which in hindsight was the wrong way to do it. But there were stages during that I just did not enjoy. And also, I think the fact that it took me, someone who likes to play through things thoroughly, get to the end, and then kind of go on to the next thing when I'm ready. This took over a year. Because I couldn't face doing it in such long stints. I had to get away from it at least 2 or 3 times. So for that reason, I wouldn't be true to myself if I attached it to my gaming showcase. But Jeff has been saved by you, so we can wander into the gallery, and you can kind of decide how you want to recognise it, either with a platinum, a gold, a silver, or bronze. There's no guidelines as to what they mean. They can mean whatever they like to you. Just know that you've kind of got 4 options, and from higher to somewhat less high. So what sort of recognition will New World get in Paper's gaming showcase in the gallery?
So it's definitely not anywhere near top tier of that platinum, or even gold, to be honest. Yeah. It's, for me, it's more around there's the opportunity for it to be good. Like with MMOs, they usually improve over time, and we've seen that already with New World. They've gone back, revisited, redone some of the stuff that we've not gone back and experienced. It might be a million times better, who knows. Are we going to go back and do it? most likely not. We're not the type that go back and replay. There are people out there that like doing that, but not really for me. So for me, it sort of sits at that bronze level at this moment in time.
Yep.
If it improves and adds more content and becomes a bit more engaging within the story, it definitely has the ability to push itself up to silver. For me, will it? Maybe, probably not. But I don't think it would drop off bronze into not being in the gallery. But I think it definitely has the ability to push itself up if it wants to in the future. We shall see. So for me, it gets that sort of bronze level. It's made it through the door mainly because there's stuff I want to go back and do.
Yep.
And I've spent so much time in it. It's rightly or wrongly, it's where it is for me, I think.
Yeah, that's fair enough. And yeah, that'll forever be in the gallery. And then if we do revisit games, like not often, but sometimes we do, it's kind of revisited with the lens of that time. So if it's in 18 months and there's been 3 expansions, it'll be taking that into account. So with the way games developed now and like live services, and they're always evolving, especially MMOs. They were like the original kind of live service, if you will, always evolving. It's something that we can kind of do going forward, is to say, right, in 2024, how's New World? And it's like, oh, it's gone up, or at the moment it's a bit crap, because they do have peaks and troughs. Each of these service games, they peak and they go down the shitter. So if there's some substantial content and you go ahead and revisit it, then we'll certainly get you back to talk about New World. And obviously in the future, when it's appropriate, some level of Guild Wars chat, because that has to have a chance at asking the question of whether it goes into the gallery and where. But we'll save that for a future edition. Just sort of tease the audience there that Guild Wars 2 perhaps coming to a gaming gallery near you. Anyway, thanks for joining me on this particular chat. It was good to finally get this out of our systems in terms of New World and get through the majority of the game and get to max level and whatnot. I feel like I can put those demons to bed now and see what the future holds. Who knows who gets tempted back into the wonderful world of New World. But there's nothing more for us to say here, though, other than thanks for your time. And ta-da.
This was a Dimp Digital production.